Hello, this is Blake O'Neill for AETudesPlus.com, and today we're going to be doing a chart climbing effect in After Effects, similar to the effect in the opening montage of Get 'Em to the Greek. If you haven't seen the preview already, this is what it looks like. Alright, let's get started here. I started out by taking several snapshots from the Billboard website. I did that just by Command-Shift-4, taking snapshots on the site. And the first one is 1 through 3. The second one is 4 through 10, then 11 through 16, then 17 through 20, then 21 through 26, and 26 to 30 finally. And then this last one here I took just to have that Hot 100 header instead of having the radio charts. I didn't want all this other busyness with the 49% and tags like that, and I wanted to have the Hot 100 header. Alright, let's jump into After Effects here. Now you can see in here I have all of my stills that we just went through in my bin here, and we're going to make a new composition, and we're going to do 1080p at 24, and 20 seconds is fine for now. So let's hit OK, and we'll make a new solid, and we'll make this white, and this is going to be our background. Let's hit OK. So let's start by taking our Hot 100 header and throwing that in there. Select our background, take the eyedropper, and select this gray here. But you can see there's a gradient here, so what we're going to do now is take the layer styles and let's add ourselves gradient. And then we'll go to our drop down in our gradient overlay, edit the gradient. Let's take our white and select the lighter color with the eyedropper, and then take our black and select the darker color of the gradient with the eyedropper. Now that should match accordingly. Next, let's bring down our 1 through 3 here, and we're going to draw a mask around this with our square mask. Now it will appear Hot 100 in the top with our 1 through 3. This is a lot easier if all of your snapshots are the same dimensions, so you don't have to resize everything. Now let's drop our 4 through 10 on. Instead of making a new mask, what I will do is copy the previous mask by hitting Command C and then pasting it on with Command V. Let's trim this just above 4, hit P to bring up the position, and we'll drag this down along the Y-axis to line this up. And what you can do now is I like to bring down the opacity, and then you can kind of just see through it so you can line it up perfectly here. Bring up the position, hitting P, adjust the Y-axis. There it is. Perfect. Alright, just bring up the opacity, put it back to 100%. Let's bring this to fit. Now let's add a new null object, and we're going to call this move. You can change this by hitting return, just change the title. Let's select all 3 of our layers that we've brought in so far. And what we're going to do is we're going to pick whip the move and parent these to that null. So now, if we make our null a 3D layer, when we drag this along the Y, everything will stay intact. So right now we have 1 through 10 so far. You can also move this along the Y-axis here by bringing up the position. And if you hold Shift and move the position, it will move exponentially faster. Let's select our 11 through 16 now. We're going to bring that down here above our 4 through 10. Let's copy our mask again and paste it on. Now let's bring up a position and bring this down along the Y-axis again. We will trim our mask to fit here, zoom in again, and again I'm going to bring down the opacity, line this up. Once you do a few of these, you'll get kind of in the groove, and then depending on how long your chart is, you'll get a little bit quicker at this once you do a couple of them. It's not that bad. So let's line this up on the Y. Alright, put the opacity back to 100, pick whip that to the null. Let's move the null up again. So now we're all the way through 16 there. So let's grab our 17 through 20 and do the same thing again. Let's copy our mask again, paste it. We're going to trim our mask here again. Let's bring down the opacity and line up our 17 through 20. Alright, bring the opacity back up. Now you guys should kind of have a feel for what we're doing here. It's pretty much the same process until we get all of these lined up. We're going to pick whip our null again and slide up along the Y. Let's grab our 21 through 26 and copy and paste the mask again. And then slide this back down along the Y. Trim our mask. And line this up again. What's great about this tutorial, it's not all that technical, but the end result produces a pretty impressive result here. No third-party plugins needed either. That's another great thing about this one. Let's pick whip that one and slide it up along the Y. And finally, let's get to our last one here, our 27 through 30. Alright, copy and paste the mask, slide it down along the Y, change the opacity once again, and slide this up to match on the Y-axis. And then bring our opacity back up. And pick whip that once more. Okay, so now what we have going on here is our null object will control our 1 through 30 all the way here. So we have this long chart from number 1 to 30. Then I'm going to select all these that are part of the chart, and to simplify things, let's just pre-compose this for now. And move all attributes, and we'll just call this chart and hit OK. So now we have our chart laid out for us right there. Another thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to add a drop shadow to our chart above our background, so it kind of differentiates from everything when this is sliding up the y-axis. And then we can just duplicate this drop shadow, and let's change the angle here. Okay, so let's jump into the chart and let's work with this in here so this is easier by itself. Alright, next what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate our last layer here, 27 through 30, and call this plate. And I'm going to draw a mask around the 30th plate. Then we're going to do a little bit of painting work here. Change this to intersect so we have just this mask showing. And we're going to come up to our clone stamp tool, make sure you're on the first frame, select an area by hitting Alt and clicking, and then we're just going to paint this out to white and do the same thing here for the number. Okay, so now we have our clean plate that we're going to work with here. Next, what we're going to do, I have this little lantern from this music video parody that I did. Let's just put him over the top. This will be our replacement image for now. Bring the opacity down, and let's do about 9.5, and then we'll draw a mask around him as well. A rectangular or square mask. Let's bring this down even further so we can see what we're drawing it around here, and just select the outer edges of this. And you can zoom in if you want to get perfect with this and line this up even further. Alright, not to waste too much time here. Let's just bring this back. Alright, that's looking better. Let's attach our image to our plate, so wherever our plate goes, the image will follow. Alright, and let's just add a quick curves adjustment here to kind of match the contrast of the other images here. Okay, that's looking a bit better. Alright, now let's add some text. Let's put my green ring. I don't know, let's make up some song name here. And let's take off the outline, and we're going to select our eyedropper and just click the other text. It looks black, but let's just make sure it matches perfectly. And let's do this. This looks like Century Gothic bold, so let's change that and bring down our sizing here. And let's bring this over on the X and Y. And our spacing looks to be a bit further. I don't even know if this is exactly the right font. It looks close enough. Then let's just add an artist name. Let's call him Lil Lantern, and size that down, and select everything here when we need to justify this to the left, and then change the position. Make that a little bit smaller, and then we'll call this the Lantern 4. And select our gray for what it looks like that color is for that text, and it looks like that's not bold. Okay, and then size this down a little bit more. Okay. Alright. You could do this in different layers, but it's just easy to, because this is going to be following everything. And then we're going to bring that down and attach it to the plate as well. So all of that will now move together as one. And if you want to keep things even cleaner, you could, pre-compose this too. Next, we're going to add our number. So let's come over here and put 30, and let's make that bold Century Gothic, size it up. And now I just bring this up here to make sure these sizes match, and then you can just slide it back down along the y-axis. Alright, and let's pick whip our number to our plate as well. So now everything we have here is following our plate. While we're at it, let's just copy and paste our background from our other comp so we have it here. Let's make all these 3D layers. I just find it easier to work with things when it's 3D, because if you need to grab it and slide it strictly along the X or Y or Z axis, you can do so. Even if they are just 2D images, I tend to do that sometimes too, and that's just personal preference. So let's make a new camera here. 35mm would be fine. Take our position of our null and put a keyframe at 0, and then let's go to about 6 seconds here. That should be long enough, and put another keyframe. Let's bring our slider down here, hit trim comp to work area. So now we have 6 seconds of sliding up the charts here. So let's put a keyframe at the end, and let's slide all the way up along the y-axis till we get to the top. Next, you can see our plate is moving with the chart, and that we do not want. So let's select our plate. We want this to be parented to nothing. So let's click on that and hit none. And now you can see it's sliding independently of everything else. Actually, it's not moving at all. Everything else is moving. So let's go in about 12 frames and let's change our move position. Let's just grab that and slide that over to about 12 frames. We're going to mark a keyframe at 0 and 12 for our plate. And let's just bring this out on the Z axis. And then let's put a drop shadow on this so it looks like there is a little bit more depth going on here. And let's just bring up the opacity and the distance here and feather this out. And then once we got that looking all right, let's just duplicate that by Command D, and that will just duplicate it. And let's change our angle here on the second one so it's like a shadow falling underneath it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to keyframe the opacity here. Let's put a keyframe at 12, and then let's drag it back down to 0, and let's set these both to 0. So now it should look like it starts to protrude out as it moves out along the z-axis. So now you can see we have our plate sliding up the chart. Let's put a keyframe here at 512, so 12 frames before the end. We're going to bring this up to align with number 1. Then let's set a keyframe at the very end, and let's change our Z to 0 again. And again, we're going to keyframe our drop shadows here at the end so they disappear. So let's set the opacity at 512, and again here at the end to 0. Alright. And then let's line this up so it's aligned correctly at the very end here on the last frame. Alright, that's looking better. Alright, so now you can see as it slides up, it kind of makes this weird little dip here. So in order to fix that, we'll select all these keyframes, and we're going to right click and go to keyframe interpolation and change this Bezier to linear. And now it will behave how we want it to, or at least how I want it to. Another thing we can do to add a little bit more is turn all these chart layers on motion blur, and then turn the motion blur on for the comp, and you can see it'll kind of blur past, makes it look a little bit more realistic, I guess, if this was even possible. Alright, next what we're going to do is we're going to cycle through these numbers. I just did this manually. Just go through, and as it passes each number, I'm selecting my number layer and hitting Command-Shift-D and splicing that layer. And then I will go back through and change all the numbers accordingly so that they match up with the numbers as they pass on the charts. So as it goes to 29, we'll change it to 29, go to 28, change it to 28, 27, change to 27, and so on. I think you guys grasp the concept, so I'll see you at the top. Alright, so now we have our effect just on a 2D surface here. It kind of pops out and goes up the charts. That's cool, but let's do a little bit more. So next, I'm going to grab all of our chart layers here, everything but our camera and background, and we're going to pre-compose this and call it chart climb. So now we have our camera, our whole chart pre-comp, and our background. Now what we can do is let's grab those drop shadows from before on our initial comp that we made, and let's just paste those onto this one. That's looking a bit better there, give us some depth to work with. Now let's keyframe the camera position on the first and last keyframes of the comp. Just give this a little camera movement, make sure this is in 3D, and let's scale up our background so we don't have to worry about it moving. And then let's just put a little camera movement on here. I'm going to zoom in here at the end and put a little rotation on here. Zoom in here a little bit more at the beginning. And yeah, you can do whatever you want here. It's pretty much personal preference of what kind of look. Maybe you want it to kind of go upwards, and you can go from like a downwards angle and slide up the chart, kind of like so. And yeah, rather quickly, without very many tools, we can make a quick animation like this. Maybe throw a vignette on here. And you can do that by double clicking on the ellipse tool, invert it, then hit F and bring up the feathering. Feather that out. Hit T, bring this down. This will kind of bring it together here a little bit more, and maybe bring the opacity down a little bit more and feather this out even further. Alright guys, well thank you for joining me, and I hope you learned a little bit here, and I hope to see you guys back again at some point. But yeah, if you just take this concept, you can do a lot of different things with it. It doesn't need to be this exact example. This can be used with other things. But yeah, stitching longer mats together and stuff like this, this is just kind of scratching the surface and what you can do with that. Alright guys, I'm Blake O'Neill. Thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you again.